I didn't learn the name people gave that room until after I'd moved in next door. Not the official name on a map or a housing form. Those always look clean, harmless, administrative. I mean the name that travels through a building the way cold travels under a door. The first time I heard it, I laughed, because it sounded like the kind of thing students invent to make an ugly dorm feel like it has personality. The suicide room, our resident advisor said, like she was pointing out a fun historical plaque. Room 733. She didn't say it with malice. She said it like gossip, like a story you tell because you can, and because you're bored, and because you've never had to lie awake at night listening to a wall breathe. It was my first day of freshman year, and everything still smelled like new notebooks and cheap detergent. My best friend Lydia and I had begged housing to keep us together. We known each other since childhood, and the idea of sharing a room with strangers felt worse than any shared bathroom or late-night fire alarm. When we got the confirmation email, same floor, same room, I felt lucky. Then I saw where they'd put us. We weren't in the bright, renovated side of the building, where the lobby had a TV and a vending machine that actually worked. We were in the old wing, 7th floor, the part people stopped mentioning once they moved out. The carpet up there had that tired, flattened look like it had given up trying to be anything but carpet. The walls were painted a shade of beige that made everything look slightly sick. Even the air was different, warmer, heavier, like the building held onto breath. Still, Lydia was with me. That made it feel survivable. By mid-morning, we had our beds made and our boxes half empty. I'd already taped up a few posters. Lydia, as usual, had chosen the calmest corner of chaos and opened a book. When our raw arrived, she did it the way some people enter a room, fast, bright, and loud enough to feel like a test. "Hi, girls. I'm Bait," she chirped, blonde ponytail swinging as she bounced across the threshold. "I'm your raw this year." I smiled because it was easier than thinking. Lydia looked up over the top of her book, expression neutral in the way that meant she'd already decided she didn't like Bait. Bait glanced around approvingly at our beds and the clothes we'd hung. Then her eyes landed on a drawing Lydia had brought from home, something with curling tentacles and a black, watchful sea. Bait lifted it like it was a menu. She turned it sideways, studying it with a puzzled little frown. "Is this like that squid monster from Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia stared at her for a long second. "It's not," she said, and went back to reading. Bait's smile stiffened, then returned, brighter. "Anyway," she said, clapping her hands once as if to reset the mood, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Side, but it has history. This building is almost 60 years old." "Yeah," I said, glancing at our small window. "The rooms are kind of tiny." Bait shrugged. People were smaller back then. Lydia's eyes flicked up again, sharp. Bait didn't seem to notice. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been hovering since we arrived. "The corner room next to us," I said, nodding toward the door in the hallway. 733. That one looks bigger. Is anyone assigned there? Could we? Bate cut me off so quickly it felt rehearsed. Oh, you don't want that room. I blinked. Why? Bate lowered her voice the way people do when they want you to lean in. A few students died in there. A long time ago. It's kind of famous. They don't assign it to anyone. It's just storage now. Then, without pausing to see our reaction, she added, also, just a reminder, this floor is girls only, and boys can't be in the hall after 11. She clapped again, like that made the conversation neat, and finished. Nice to meet you. And before either of us could say anything, she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. For a moment, all we could hear was the distant hum of an elevator and the muffled sounds of other students moving in. Lydia shut her book with a soft thud and stared into the hallway like she expected Bate to pop back in just to say something else unbearable. I hate her, Lydia said calmly. Did you hear what she just dropped in our laps? I asked. My voice came out too high. Lydia waved a hand. Every campus has tragedies. People talk. It becomes a legend. In the same room, I pressed. Lydia sighed, the sound of someone trying to keep me from spiraling on day one. Becca, it's not our room. I looked at our window again. It was narrow, more narrow than it had seemed from outside. If you leaned close, you could feel the faint, cool draft around the edges. It's just, I said, this floor is so high. The idea of someone, I stopped, not finishing the thought. Lydia made a face. Please don't. You know I hate heights. I forced a laugh, trying to shake it off. Fine, I won't. But if there really were deaths in that room, why keep it on this floor at all? Because colleges don't like to admit the ugly parts, Lydia said, too matter of fact. Then she shifted her bed slightly farther from the window, like moving furniture could move a thought. For the next few weeks, life did what it always does. It filled the space. Classes started. Cafeteria food became familiar in the way that made it worse. Lydia made friends easily, and by late September, she was dating a guy named Mike, a loud, confident frat type with a smile that looked practiced. I started seeing an upperclassman named Ian who wore flannel year-round and treated studying like an unfortunate myth. The dorm became normal. The old carpet became background. The beige walls stopped feeling sick and started feeling like home in that temporary college way. If you asked me then, I would have told you Bates' comment was nothing, just a dramatic raw trying to sound interesting. Then October arrived, and with it, the kind of cold that makes buildings creak. The first night it happened, it woke me out of a dream like someone had yanked a cord. A harsh scraping sound, followed by a deep, heavy slam. I sat up in bed, heart beating fast for no reason I could name. Lydia sat up too, hair messy, eyes wide in the dark. Another scrape, another slam. It wasn't hallway noise. It wasn't laughter or footsteps or someone getting locked out. It was too close, too deliberate. It sounded like something being forced, like a window being pushed open against resistance. Lydia turned her head slowly toward the wall we shared with the corner room. "That's the window," she whispered. Another scrape. I listened, the way you listen when you're trying to decide if something is real. Then the slam came again, hard enough that I felt it in the frame of our own window. "Someone's messing around," I said, but it sounded like I was trying to convince myself. Lydia didn't answer. She just stared at the wall like it might answer for her. We kept our own window locked since move-in. Lydia insisted. "If I can't climb out, nobody else can climb in," she'd said, half joking. That night, her joke didn't feel like a joke anymore. Another scrape, another slam. "Should we call bait?" I asked. Lydia's mouth tightened. "No." "Then what do we do?" "We ignore it," Lydia said, and tried to lie back down. But the sound continued, steady and patient. Like whatever was doing, it had all the time in the world. By the time it finally stopped, the silence felt even worse. The next morning, I checked from outside between classes. The corner windows were open, both of them wide. That room, which Bate had called storage, looked dark and empty behind the glass. It made no sense. If it was locked, who opened them? And why leave them open on a cold night? For a week, nothing else happened. The windows stayed open. The room stayed dark. I started to believe my brain had exaggerated the sound. Then one afternoon, it happened again, but closer. I was alone in our room, editing notes with my headphones on low. I heard a knock at the door, muffled by the music. "Come in," I called, not looking up. A second knock came, harder, impatient. I pulled the headphones off. The door to the hallway stood open, exactly the way I'd left it, because Ian was supposed to stop by. There was no one there. Before I could stand and check, a new sound came from behind me. A light tapping, then a heavier knock. From the closet. Our closet shared a wall with the corner room. I felt my stomach drop, like I'd missed a step on stairs. "Lydia," I called automatically, then remembered she was in class. The knocking came again. 3 taps, then one slow, heavier thud, as if someone was trying to get my attention without making too much noise. I walked toward the closet, every instinct arguing with the idea, and put my hand on the knob. From behind me, Lydia's voice snapped, sharp and real. "What are you doing?" I whipped around so fast, I nearly stumbled. Lydia stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyebrows raised. "I just got back," she said. "Why do you look like you saw a ghost?" I stared at her, then at the closet, then back at her. "Someone was knocking," I said. Lydia looked at the closet like it offended her. She crossed the room and yanked it open. Nothing, just clothes and boxes, and the smell of cardboard. She glanced back at me, unimpressed. "Becca," she said gently, "you are making yourself sick." I heard it, I insisted, but even I could hear how thin it sounded. Ian arrived minutes later and immediately sensed the tension. He sat on my bed, asked what was wrong, and listened without laughing when I told him about the windows and the knocking. When I mentioned the corner room number, his expression shifted slightly. 733, he repeated. Yeah, I've heard about that. Lydia groaned. Please don't say the name. Ian gave her a look. People talk, he said. There were deaths a while back, enough that housing stopped using it. How many? I asked. Ian hesitated like he wasn't sure he should say. 3, I think. Different years. Lydia crossed her arms. We were told 2. Ian shrugged. Stories change, but it's always the same room. I stared at the wall again, and for the first time, the thought hit me with real weight. If enough people believed something about a place, it stopped being just a story. It became a shape your brain recognized in the dark. After that, Lydia stopped rolling her eyes when I flinched at small noises. She still pretended it was all stress, midterms, imagination. But at night, she slept with her back to the wall farthest from the closet, and she kept her lamp within arm's reach. A few nights later, we woke to whispering, not the normal whispering of friends passing in the hallway, not the muffled laughter of people who thought they were quiet. This was different, thin and close, as if it were coming from inside the wall itself. Lydia sat up slowly, eyes fixed. She raised a finger to her lips, telling me not to speak. I held my breath and listened. The whispering wasn't in English, not clearly. It sounded like broken fragments of words, like someone speaking through water. I slid out of bed and padded toward Lydia. The closer I got to her side, the louder it became. She leaned her ear toward the wall, face pale. The whispering stopped mid-syllable. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a sudden heavy thump came from the other side. So loud, Lydia jerked back with a sharp gasp, pressing her hand to her ear like it hurt. Something was there, something responding. I didn't feel fear first. I felt anger, the kind that comes when you've been pushed too far by something you can't control. I grabbed my hoodie and stormed into the hallway, ignoring how cold the air felt. I marched to the corner room door, the one Bate had called storage. A sign was taped to it, supply room. I knocked hard. Whoever is in there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is not funny. No answer. I grabbed the handle. It didn't move. It was locked from the outside. I stepped back, staring at it, and the anger drained away, leaving something heavier underneath. Behind me, Lydia cracked our door open just enough to peek out. Her eyes asked the question she didn't want to say. I turned toward her and forced my face into something calmer. Someone is trying to scare us, I said, louder than necessary, in case anyone else was listening. That's all. Lydia nodded quickly and shut the door again. I knelt on the carpet, pressing my cheek to the floor, and peered under the supply room door. Dust, darkness, the underside of stacked metal. really did look like storage chairs, bed frames, a pile of old mattresses, everything coated in a thick layer of neglect. And then the darkness shifted, like someone had moved in front of the light. For one single heartbeat, I thought I saw something close to the crack, something watching. I stumbled backward and hit the opposite wall. I didn't scream that time, but my whole body shook as if I had. From then on, our rule became simple. Neither of us stayed in our room alone at night. If Lydia stayed with Mike, I stayed with Ian. If I stayed off campus, Lydia did too. We treated our dorm room like it was safe only during daylight, like it turned into something else when the sun went down. Housing took its time answering our transfer requests. Processing, the portal kept saying, day after day. Meanwhile, the corner windows remained open, and the whispering continued, sporadic, patient, like a presence that didn't care whether we believed in it, like something that had already decided we were part of its week. Ian suggested we talk to the campus paranormal club as a joke at first, but then he looked at our faces and stopped smiling. They might be annoying, he said, but sometimes those groups know the history, or at least where to find it. Lydia made a noise of disbelief. Absolutely not. But after another night of whispering, and a morning where the supply room windows were open even though the air outside felt like ice, Lydia gave in with a dramatic sigh. Fine. We'll talk to your ghost club. The Paranormal Society met in a small room in the student center. 5 students sat behind a folding table like they were holding court. The one in the middle, a tidy, serious-looking guy named Craig, listened as we described what we'd heard and seen. They took notes, nodding solemnly, like they were doctors, and we were describing symptoms. When we finished, Craig cleared his throat. You're dealing with a very angry spirit, he announced. Lydia stared at him. That's your professional conclusion. Craig blinked, offended by the word professional. It's our assessment, yes. There's likely a reason it's attached to that room. And you can fix it, I said cautiously, already knowing I didn't like where this was going. We can help, Craig said. We do ask for a small donation to the society. Supplies aren't free. Lydia stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Thank you so much for your time, she said, voice sweet and sharp. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me out before Craig could offer a pamphlet or a payment link. In the hallway, Lydia exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. That was a waste, she said. I didn't argue. But as much as I wanted to dismiss them, the truth was simple. Something was happening, and nobody official wanted to talk about it. That was when Alice appeared. I met her at resident services when I went to check our transfer status for the 3rd time that week. The girl behind the desk, short dark hair, tired eyes, recognized my name before I even finished introducing myself. You're the one from 734, she said. 7th floor, old wing. My stomach tightened. Yes, I said. Is there any update? She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Why do you want to move? I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I didn't have the energy to invent a polite lie. Because the room next to us, 733, the locked supply room, something is wrong, I said. We hear things, we see things, and I think something is in there. The girl stared at me for a long moment, not laughing, not doubting. Then she exhaled slowly, like someone whose private suspicion had just been confirmed by a stranger. My name is Alice, she said. Come to Taylor Hall, room 310 at 4. I can tell you what I know. At 4, Alice's room looked like the opposite of mine, organized in a way that felt intentional, with books stacked carefully, and symbols I didn't recognize tucked among the ordinary. She listened as I told her everything again, from Bates' comment to the whispering to the moment under the door. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her face. I always heard rumors, she said quietly, but I didn't think the activity would be this direct. What do you think it is? I asked. Alice didn't answer immediately. She chose her words the way people do when they don't want to make something more real by numbing it. Something old, she said at last. Something that enjoys attention, and it's clever. That's not helpful, I said, trying to smile. It's not meant to be comforting, Alice replied. Comfort is how it wins. She told me there had been multiple tragedies connected to that room over decades, enough that the building had been renovated, rooms renumbered, records tucked away. Every few years, she said, people forget. New students move in. The story becomes a whisper again, and then it starts over. So what does it want? I asked. Alice's gaze flicked toward my shoulder, like she was listening to something behind me. It wants people alone, she said. It wants fear. It wants someone to step closer. I laughed once, sharp. We're not stepping closer. I believe you, Alice said, but it doesn't need your permission to push. Over the next few days, Alice tried to help us find the truth. She mentioned an administrator, Tom Moan, who had worked at the university for decades and supposedly knew what happened when the first tragedy occurred. Alice said she'd tried to speak to him before, but he avoided her. We tried anyway. We waited near his office. We waited near the staff parking lot. We caught glimpses of an older man with a stiff posture who turned away the moment he noticed us. He's scared, Alice muttered after the third failed attempt. Or guilty. Either way, it left us with nothing concrete, only the same sounds at night, the same open windows, the same sense of being watched through walls. By the week before Halloween, I was running on nerves. Even during the day, our room felt off, like the air didn't settle properly. Lydia stopped pretending it didn't bother her. She didn't joke about the legend anymore. She moved through the room quickly, as if lingering too long might invite something to notice. Then came the mirror. It was Thursday evening. I'd come back to shower and change before meeting Ian at a party. Lydia was staying with Mike. I was alone, and I hated it, but I told myself it would only be an hour. To drown out the silence, I turned on music and let it fill the room. I dried my hair in front of our cheap mirror, flipping my head down, focusing on normal things: volume, frizz, time. When I turned the dryer off, the music seemed suddenly far away. And in the mirror behind me, I didn't see our room. I saw the supply room, dust-coated bed frames, old mattresses stacked under massive corner windows. Darkness pooled in the corners like ink. It was the same scene I'd glimpsed under the door, except sharper, as if the mirror had decided to become a window. I spun around, expecting to see my own room. It was my own room. I turned back to the mirror, still the supply room. For a second, my brain tried to make it logical: reflection, angle, lighting, exhaustion. Then something shifted in the reflected darkness, and logic snapped like a thin stick. I grabbed my purse and phone and ran. In the elevator, hands shaking, I called Alice. She answered on the second ring. "I can't do this anymore," I said, voice breaking. It showed me the other room. In the mirror, Alice swore under her breath, not at me, at the situation. "That's escalation," she said. "It's trying to blur the boundary." "I'm never going back," I said. "Listen," Alice replied, tone firm. "We need Tom Moan. He's the only one who might tell us how it started. Meet me tomorrow at the Atrium Starbucks at 6:30. 6:30, I repeated, exhausted. "Yes," Alice said, "before he can avoid us." That night, I went to the party and drank more than I ever had, not because I wanted to celebrate, but because I wanted my body to stop vibrating with fear. Ian stayed close to me, worried and gentle, and I clung to normality like it could keep me safe. Around midnight, I stepped outside to breathe and checked my phone. There was a voicemail from Lydia. Her voice was thick with anger and exhaustion. She fought with Mike. His fraternity had dared the new members to spend a night in the suicide room, she said, on our floor, in our building. Mike insisted it was just a prank, just an initiation, but Lydia couldn't stand it. She sounded furious, betrayed, and too tired to filter herself. The message ended with her trying to convince me she was fine. She said she was going back to our dorm to sleep because she didn't want to be near Mike. She said she was too angry to be scared. My blood turned cold. I found Ian and asked him to take me back. My head spun from alcohol and fear, and those two things do not mix. They turn simple thoughts into alarms. At 6 a.m, my alarm went off like an insult. I pulled on yesterday's clothes and stumbled across campus to the atrium. Alice was already there, holding black coffee like it was medicine. "You texted me last night," she said, watching my face. "You told me about the fraternity dare." "I don't remember," I admitted. Alice's expression tightened. "That's the point," she said. "It's not just haunting. It's manipulation. It nudges the right people at the right time. We waited for Tom Moan. He never came. After half an hour, Alice's shoulders sagged. "He's avoiding us again," she said. We went to the administrative desk anyway, hopping to catch him inside. The receptionist looked at us like she already knew why we were there. "Tom won't be in," she said crisply. "Not today. Not any day. He resigned yesterday." Alice stared, stunned. "Resigned," she echoed. "Yes," the receptionist said, with a faint edge of satisfaction. "I suppose you won't be bothering him anymore." Alice's jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she exhaled slowly and turned to me. "Your transfer," she said. "I checked this morning. It went through." I blinked, not sure I heard right. "It did?" "Yes," Alice said. "You're moving Monday." Relief hit me so hard I nearly cried on the spot. "And Lydia?" I asked immediately. "Different dorm," Alice said. "You won't be together, but you'll be out." I grabbed my phone to call Lydia, and that's when I noticed the voicemail icon again. One I hadn't listened to yet. It was Lydia. A continuation of the earlier message, recorded later in the night. Her voice sounded looser, slower. She was upset, but she was also trying to make everything okay. She said she was going back to our room. She said she could sleep through anything. She said she'd be alone. I looked up at Alice, and I didn't have to say it. Alice's face drained of color. "We need to go," she said. We ran. Campus at that hour was full of students drifting toward classes with coffee and headphones and sleepy faces. None of them knew what we knew. None of them felt the urgency that made the world narrow to one building, one floor, one hallway. When the dorm came into view, my heart sank. From outside, I could see the corner windows. They were closed, both of them, for the first time since October began, and our room window was open. We sprinted inside. We hit the elevator button hard enough to make it beep twice. The doors closed slowly, unbearably, like the building was taking its time on purpose. On the 7th floor, the hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I ran to our door and shoved it open. Lydia was there. For one tiny, fragile second, relief filled me so hard my knees weakened. Lydia stood near the window, eyes wet, face drawn. She looked at me like she'd been trying to hold herself together and had run out of strength. "Becca," she whispered, like she couldn't believe I was real. I took a step toward her, and then something changed in her expression, just a flicker, like her focus slid past me to something behind me, or beyond me, or inside the room where it didn't belong. She leaned forward, slow and unnatural, like a puppet whose strings had gone slack. I lunged. I was too far. Lydia was gone from the window. The world outside erupted into sound, shouts, a distant scream, feet pounding on stairs. I don't remember moving. I remember my body folding to the floor as if someone had turned off the power inside me. I remember Alice shouting for help in the hallway. I remember the rush of people. I remember sirens that didn't feel real because nothing could be real after that. Later, after the building had been filled with officials and questions and stunned faces, someone moved my hands away from the window ledge because they were gripping it so tightly my fingers had gone numb. I don't talk about what happened in the minutes after. Not because I'm hiding details, but because my mind protected itself by refusing to store them clearly. The part I remember in perfect focus is the room itself. The floor was littered with paper, dozens of drawings. Lydia had been sketching all night. At first glance, they looked like portraits, people rendered with Lydia's usual skill, but twisted by something that didn't belong to her. Faces I recognized from stories she'd told me. Family members, friends, people she loved. Each one drawn with a strange, wrong stillness that made my stomach roll. I made myself look away. Near the closet, a single sheet slid out from under the door like it had been gently pushed. I stared at it, shaking. It was a drawing of our closet, drawn from my point of view, door open, darkness inside, and something in the darkness. Not a monster in the way movies show monsters. Not claws and fangs. Something worse, a shape that looked almost like a person, until you stared long enough to realize it didn't understand how people were supposed to be made. I lifted my eyes to the closet. The door was open. I don't know why I stepped toward it. I don't know why my body wanted to confirm what my brain was begging me not to confirm. Grief does strange things. It makes you chase pain like it's an answer. Before I could get close enough to see, Alice grabbed my arm hard and pulled me back like she was saving me from a fire. "Do not look," she said, voice trembling for the first time since I'd met her. "Do not give it what it wants." I didn't understand then, not fully, but I listened. My parents arrived that afternoon. They didn't ask for a detailed explanation. They could see the truth in my face. They packed my things without letting me go back alone. Lydia's side of the room stayed untouched, as if her life might return to fill it again. It didn't. I finished the semester from off campus, in a small apartment that didn't creak and didn't whisper, and didn't have a corner room next door that the building refused to name properly. I transferred after winter break. I changed my major. I changed my routine. I changed the way I slept. What I couldn't change was the way the memory followed me. For months, I woke up with the same nightmare. Lydia standing near a window she hated, not terrified enough to move, trapped in a moment that seemed to stretch forever. In the dream, she always looked at me once, like she wanted to apologize for something that wasn't her fault. Then the dream ended the same way every time, with my hands empty and my throat full of air I couldn't use. Years passed. Life moved forward in the way life always insists on doing. I graduated from somewhere else. I found work. I made new friends. I learned how to laugh without feeling guilty. I learned how to walk into a room without checking corners first. But every fall, when the semester started, I found myself thinking about that building. about the seventh floor, about the way stories survive longer than students do. So I called resident services, not to relive it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because a part of me believed, irrationally, stubbornly, that if I kept asking, someone would finally say, "We shut it down. It's gone." Every year, they told me the same thing. "Riley Hall is open," someone would say. "The seventh floor." I ask, pretending it was casual. "The seventh floor is closed," they answer. And I'd exhale, a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 9 years after Lydia died, work and travel shifted my schedule. I forgot to call in September. I forgot to call in early October. The first time I remembered was mid-November, on a gray afternoon when the world looked drained of color. I dialed resident services, expecting the same script, the same reassurance. The line rang. Then hold music, tinny, distant. A man finally answered. "Resident services," he said. "You were asking about available rooms in Riley." "Yes," I said, voice suddenly dry. "We've been full," he said. "Long waiting list. But you called at a good time." My stomach tightened. "Why?" There was a pause, the kind where paper shuffles and a keyboard clicks. "Well," he said, as if he were reading something ordinary, "we got approval this morning." "Approval for what?" I asked. And even as I spoke, I knew I didn't want the answer. He sounded faintly pleased, like someone delivering good news. "We're reopening the seventh floor." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Behind the man's voice, faintly through the phone line, I heard something else. Not clearly, not enough to swear in court, but it reminded me of a sound I hadn't heard in years. A slow scrape, a patient, deliberate pressure, like a window being opened, inch by inch, against an old frame. I hung up without saying goodbye. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I dreamed of a door labeled supply room and a hand turning the handle from the inside.